Alrighty, folks. Thought we'd bring you in on the birthing out of a new dream center. So, got a new one birthing out here in Arizona. It started as all dream centers do, not with a great idea, and not with a lot of money, and not with us knowing what the heck we're doing. It started with a need, and we found the need, and now we're going about the process of filling that need. So the need in this situation is one of our more complex needs. So I work with the governor's office for human trafficking, and one of my roles is to try to expand our state's ability to house victims of trafficking. And adults, we're growing pretty steadily year after year. Juveniles, we just continue to lose beds and lose providers, and it's bottom line is it's just tough stuff. There's licensing challenges and all kinds of other challenges. But one of the primary challenges that service providers see is there is an inordinately high run rate among juveniles who are recovered. We recover them fairly consistently and steadily through law enforcement. Law enforcement attempts to place them into group homes and lower security shelters, and they just run. They run within a day. They run within a week. Some of them run within hours. Those are the ones that law enforcement takes, and then the ones that are through DCS, Department of Child Safety. They don't even make it to the shelters most times. The caseworker stops at a stoplight and the kid jumps out and is gone. And just the way our laws are toward children, we can't restrain them. Some of the shelters can, the RTCs can, but caseworkers, they can't restrain them. So the kids just unlock the door and bail out and they're gone. And so, and when I say inordinately high, I mean normal is 8 out of 10 juveniles will run. Very often providers experience 9 out of 10 will run within the first 30 days. And so that's the need. The need is how can we better help these kids? I was a part of a group of stakeholders for the state of Arizona a year ago, and we were having a problem even getting referrals from the state because they weren't looking for trafficking. And so we fixed that. So here we are, our new collaborative then that we formed between law enforcement, one of our health providers, and then one of the hospitals, and then some of the service providers. And so the way the collaborative works is law enforcement recovers the juvenile, and law enforcement, not the caseworker, does the transportation, so the kids don't run anymore in the by the way, I probably should say that it seems foreign, I think, especially to folks new to trafficking. It seems like a foreign concept that these kids would run. Like, they got rescued out of this horrendous situation. Why would they want to run? But there are a number of factors and dynamics that happen if the juvenile's been in the life any amount of time, 6 months, a year. A trauma bond begins to form, and it's this bond that a victim has between them and their trafficker, similar to Stockholm syndrome, but not quite the same. It's born out of trauma, which Stockholm is too, but they recognize it as different. So this trauma bond forms between the predominantly girls and their traffickers, and they are essentially brainwashed, but then emotionally they are bound to that trafficker, to the point to where they might not even know where they're running to. In fact, they don't even know where they are when they're recovered. They just take off running because they're trying to get back to that. They're not trying to get back really to a location or a person as much as they're trying to get back to that a spot where that emotional bond is recognized again within them. And so our collaborative, law enforcement recovers the juveniles. They do the transportation over to what's called an OSCA unit, which is a high-level, high-security observational unit at the hospital, and 23 hours, the kiddo is being evaluated and assessed, and just kind of, if they're on something really heavy, we make sure they detox off of it correctly. If they are have life-threatening illnesses or diseases, it's taken care of right then. And then, of course, if they are suicidal, which we see quite often that happens, that's all kind of worked out within the first 23 hours. 23 hours is the max, and they can be admitted into deeper levels of care, higher levels of care at the hospital that they need. But once they're somewhat stabilized, emergency critical triage, the first 23 hours, then again, law enforcement transports them to a shelter, a human trafficking shelter. Now, this is where we had the real flip. So up to that point, as long as law enforcement, there's no run rate, there's no anything. Now, from that point on, from the point of placement on, in the previous model, is where we had the 80-90% run rates. And what we found, though, is that among group homes, there were varying levels of security. Security guards. Some of the security was real. It was like walls and doors and locks and fences and stuff. And some of the security was implied. It was security guards, but I mean, it's not implied. They're security guards. And so there was an implied sense that if you're there, you can't run. You're kind of like a quasi-detention center type thing. And so what we found is that when we placed girls in those higher level group home facilities for a period of time, for 30 days to 3 months, that we were able to break that trauma bond, which from that moment on, then they were no longer that huge flight risk. They had normal tendencies to run, and so what we came across then was that those higher level facility group homes, who could provide a soft detention center setting, if you will, became a critical role in breaking the trauma bond. And then from there, we can move them to what we call a step-down facility, which is places like one of our facilities that we've got a wall, but they can jump in, they can walk right out the door. We have lower levels of security. And so it became necessary for us to, it didn't become necessary. We found immense success when we sent them to higher level quasi-lockdown facilities. And so that became a huge need, but I think we've served around 80 kids over the last few months, 80 girls out of human trafficking. At that rate, we filled up all the higher level security group homes within a matter of a month. And so then there were no more beds. So then we were back to, let's place them wherever we can, and we get them into these group homes. And in that model, then we're back to the higher level run rates. And so we can't deny the numbers. Nobody likes to lock kids up, and these higher level security group homes, the kids can still run. They just go after them, they find them. And law enforcement goes after them, brings them back, And so no one wants to lock kids up, but what we're finding is that if we don't have a higher level security system than just your normal group home with low barriers to exit, then what happens is you have these inordinately high run rates. And if you follow those kids, the kids that have run multiple times, most of them end up in jail or dead anyway. And it's hard to say that, hard to swallow that, but the reality we have is that if we don't do something when they first come out, if they are a flight risk and they've been in the life and they have the trauma bond, these are all things that can be evaluated and assessed. If they have that, when you take them to the higher level security facilities or detention or correction or something, the run rate is gone, but also you break the trauma bond and help them be ready for the next layer. So that was the need for the Dream Center, is to how do we get more beds, more of those higher level security beds for for juveniles. And so we have a 48-bed facility for juveniles now. It's better equipped for the step-down model that I talked about. And so I began to just talk to some donors. Had lunch with the donor that I'm going to lunch with right now. Had lunch with him a couple months ago, and we were just talking, and he asked what I've been up to, and I said, well, we found a new need and trying to figure this out. Trying to look for a place on the outskirts of town, that has an implied deterrent to run, a place that has walls, that we can hire security guards. And I said, I've got a little money for it, but I'll need to fundraise for it. But I don't have the property, I don't have the land, I don't have anything like that. And so he called me a couple days after that meeting, and he said, I've talked to some people who own a big ranch. They have like 1,800 acres of land in a community about 40 miles outside of Phoenix proper. And I said, wow, that could be perfect. And so he brought them down to my juvenile site, the 48 beds for juveniles, and we shared the vision and the heart with them, and toured the facility and shared with them just exactly what I shared with you, that girls don't even get a chance to make it to that shelter if they're constantly running. And so they came back a couple days later and said, hey, we're going to give you $500,000 of land and help you do some fundraising and get something built for these girls. And I was like, really? Like, this is really going to happen? And so we've drawn up some drawings, some drafts of what the facility might look like, and I'm taking those to meet with this donor for lunch today. The steps that we outlined in some of the earlier videos with how do you get a building have all begun. So we have the land donation and a little bit of money, but we needed permission from the city because it's rural. We also needed the city to annex it. So if they annex it, we pay taxes on it, but we also get utilities. We get water, we get electric and sewer and all the things that we need, because the property is fairly remote. And so I'm hoping to hear today that the city council is open to annexation. It might take 6 months, might take a year, but that'll give me time to fundraise for it. And I'm hoping to hear a little bit about some fundraising efforts that we might be able to do together. So we are midway through just the acquisition process. That's not true. We've acquired the property, and now we're midway through just the planning of it, what the building's going to look like, the security. This is one of those rare moments when we are going to be able to build from the ground up, which is pretty amazing as well. And so I'll have those blueprints at the next Dream Conference and be able to put them on a drive for you guys to see kind of how we do brand new shelters. So pray for us, pray for all these kids. We estimate we start with a 40-bed facility. We'll serve 300 girls a year that are probably need to go to juvenile corrections just because they're a high flight risk, but are better served in a higher level security, but lower level detention center. Of course, we'll have medical there for the girls, and really it is going to be intense. Like, it's girls that have a trauma bond are fighters, and they're runners, and they are hurt kids, and hurt kids hurt staff, and hurt facilities, and hurt things. But when you can get them through that, and you do get them through that, when you get them through that, they come back, and usually they come back stronger, wiser, and graduate our programs and do really good. So pray for us. We're starting the adventure again. God bless you guys. Bye-bye.